High above the ground, a team was working to install a massive glass window panel, one of those heavy architectural pieces that require absolute precision. The lift system supporting the glass was already struggling, its rigging clearly near its limits. As the workers tried to guide the panel into place, the strain became too much. The cables slipped, the weight shifted, and the entire sheet dropped straight out of the rig. It hit the ground with a violent crash, exploding into thousands of razor-sharp shards. No one was hurt, but the situation could have been far worse. Incidents like this happen when the weight limits of lifting gear are pushed or misjudged. When handling heavy glass, every movement has to be calculated, because one wrong lift can turn into a dangerous collapse in seconds. Two workers stood elevated on a lift, trying to fix a jammed rolling steel door. Using long metal rods, they tried to free the mechanism manually. The moment they released the trapped tension, the entire door dropped with full force, slamming shut in an instant. As it hit the ground, a burst of thick dust and smoke shot upward, surrounding the lift and nearly blinding both workers. Thankfully, they stayed composed, but the situation could have turned disastrous, especially at that height. Sudden drops like this can easily shake a platform or cause a fall. Tackling jammed industrial doors without fully securing the mechanism first is always a gamble. When dealing with heavy moving parts, the safest approach is slowing down and controlling the release instead of forcing it. On a normal highway filled with fast-moving traffic, a dump truck was driving with its hydraulic bed fully raised, something the driver either missed completely or forgot to lower. With the bed towering above the cab like a giant metal wall, the truck headed straight for an overhead road sign gantry. There was no stopping. The raised bed struck the steel frame with massive force, slicing into it and ripping the structure apart. The impact jolted the truck violently before finally bringing everything to a halt. It was a miracle that no one was injured, because the collision could have caused the entire sign to collapse onto other vehicles. This type of incident almost always comes down to basic pre-drive checks. A quick walk around or a glance at the hydraulics panel would have prevented thousands of pounds in damage and a very close call. At what appears to be a large film studio construction site, a mobile crane was preparing to lift a traditional-style roof section, an oversized, extremely heavy structure. From the moment the lift started, the load visibly pushed the crane towards its limits. It simply wasn't configured for the weight being placed on it. As the boom raised, the crane's balance shifted. The outriggers began losing firm ground contact, and the entire vehicle leaned dangerously to one side. Within seconds, the crane tipped over completely, crashing onto the ground and destroying both the truck and the roof section it was carrying. Misjudging load weight is one of the quickest ways to topple a crane, and once it starts going over, there's no pulling it back. Heavy lifts always require preparation, correct capacity charts, angle planning, and stable ground, otherwise disaster becomes inevitable. Inside a busy port terminal, a crane operator was moving a stack of shipping containers, routine work for the setting. Nearby, a truck driver waited inside his cab, unaware of the danger developing above him. Something went wrong during the lift. Either the containers weren't properly locked together or they had been positioned unevenly. The instability escalated quickly until several containers slipped free and fell from a significant height. They crashed down only a few feet away from the truck, sending shockwaves through the ground. Had the driver been positioned slightly differently, the cab could have been completely crushed. This type of incident usually traces back to rushed loading or improper twist-lock engagement. When containers aren't secured perfectly, gravity becomes the deciding factor, and it doesn't forgive mistakes.
If you're still watching at this point, you're clearly enjoying the video. Do me one favor, tap subscribe. It helps the channel massively and lets me keep making videos like this for you. All right, let's get back to it. In a tight industrial workshop, workers were moving large sheets of glass with an overhead hoist system. One operator controlled the lift, while another stood on the ground to guide the load around obstacles. But communication broke down. The operator's view was blocked, and the guiding worker failed to step in or stop the movement. Without a clear path, the suspended glass drifted toward a metal object. The moment it made contact, the entire pane shattered violently, scattering fragments across the floor and creating a hazardous mess. No one was hurt, but the cost and danger were significant. Glass handling requires perfect coordination between the operator and the spotter. When one person can't see and the other doesn't intervene, a small collision can instantly become a full-scale failure. Inside a vehicle service pit, two workers were inspecting a large truck, something they likely did every day. The truck was elevated using a hydraulic jack, a tool that must hold thousands of kilograms without fail. But during the inspection, the jack suddenly gave out. With nothing supporting the weight anymore, the entire vehicle dropped rapidly, hitting the ground with terrifying force. Both workers managed to avoid being crushed, but the margin between survival and disaster was incredibly thin. Hydraulic failures often happen without warning, especially when equipment is worn, overloaded, or improperly locked. In workshops, secondary supports such as jack stands exist for a reason. Depending on a single hydraulic point for a vehicle that size leaves no room for error. In a cluttered industrial yard filled with scrap metal and equipment, several workers stood near a gas cylinder that had a slow, unnoticed leak. One worker attempted to repair it using a welding torch, a fatal misunderstanding of how pressure vessels behave. As soon as the torch flame touched the leaking valve, the escaping gas ignited instantly. The cylinder launched itself like a rocket, propelled by the sudden burst of pressure. Debris flew, smoke filled the area, and workers scattered in panic. Incidents like this happen when people underestimate how volatile compressed gas can be. Repairs need to be handled by trained personnel using proper isolation techniques, not improvised fixes. When flammable gas, pressure, and heat combine, the result is always explosive. On a quiet city street, a truck carrying heavy concrete rings began making a turn near parked cars and pedestrians. The load was stacked high, likely too high, and either improperly tied down or exceeding the truck's safe handling limits. As the driver committed to the turn, the weight shifted sharply. The restraints couldn't handle the movement, and several of the massive concrete pieces rolled off the truck. They smashed into the street and nearby vehicles, causing extensive damage and sending debris in all directions. Thankfully, no one was standing in the impact zone. Load security failures like this usually come down to poor weight distribution or rushing to secure cargo. On a multi-story construction site, a crew attempted to lift a full-sized forklift using a crane, an operation that requires flawless rigging and weight balancing. As the machine was raised, it became clear the setup wasn't stable. The forklift shifted, tilting dangerously toward the building facade. Workers nearby reacted quickly, but the instability kept increasing until the lift was on the brink of turning into a full drop. This type of failure usually comes from miscalculating the center of gravity or using slings that aren't configured correctly for the load. When heavy machinery is lifted without proper balance, even the slightest shift can send the entire operation sideways. Lifts involving vehicles require slow, controlled adjustments and constant monitoring, because once the weight starts swinging, control disappears fast.